Welcome back to the elephant in the room. If you've been here before, then I would like to welcome you home. If this is your first time here, then I'm really glad you found your way to this space. This is the kind of podcast where we talk about the things people usually keep tucked away. The struggles, the doubts, the hard questions, and the uncomfortable truths that church culture doesn't always make room for. And we talk about them honestly, with scripture underneath it all. So if you're ready to get rid of your elephants in the room, then as I said before, I'm glad you found your way to this space. But if you have a made-up mind that you're going to hold on to your elephants, then you might not want to listen to this show. My name is Pastor James, and this is The Elephant in the Room. What is this strange new fruit? Suicide or homicide? Tonight's episode opens up the question of strange fruit and asks why generations after lynching was supposed to be history, Black families are still forced to question official answers when loved ones are found hanging in public spaces. Before any authority calls such a death suicide, the public deserves evidence strong enough to overcome the weight of American history. Before we talk about systems, before we talk about investigations, before we talk about what officials said and what families were asked to accept, we are going to stop. We are going to breathe. And we are going to say their names like they mattered. Because they did. And they do. Not as headlines, not as statistics, not as rumors passed from one news cycle to the next. These were people with voices, families, histories, birthdays, unfinished plans, and futures that should not have ended beneath a tree. So tonight we begin here. Willie Andrew Jones Jr., 21 years old, Scott County, Mississippi, February 8th, 2018. Say his name. Otis James Byrd, 54 years old, near Port Gibson, Mississippi, March 19th, 2015. Say his name. Malcolm Hirsch, 38 years old, near Victorville, California, May 31st, 2020. Say his name. Dominique Alexander, 27 years old, Fort Tryon Park, New York City, June 9th, 2020. Say his name. Robert L. Fuller, 24 years old, Palmdale, California, June 10th, 2020. Say his name. Javion Malik McGee, 21 years old, Vance County, North Carolina, September 11th, 2024. Say his name. Demartri Von Trey Reed, 21 years old, Cleveland, Mississippi, September 15th, 2025. Say his name. Kyle Basinger, 21 years old, Marietta, Georgia, February 18th, 2026. Say his name. Juliana Umba Nita, 16 years old, Charlotte, North Carolina, May 18th, 2026. Say her name. Nine names, 9 families, 9 empty chairs, 9 sets of people who had to wake up to the kind of news that divides lives into before and after. And if your first instinct is to debate them, dismiss them, or rush past them, then I need you to sit with that, because this episode does not begin with suspicion. It begins with remembrance. It begins with dignity. It begins with the refusal to let the dead be reduced to paperwork before the living have been shown the truth. Welcome back to the elephant in the room. Now I want you to sit with the image that ties these stories to a history this country has spent more than a century trying to bury. A tree, a rope, a body discovered in the open, a family waiting for answers, and before the grief has even had time to settle, before every camera has been pulled, before every witness has been found, before the science has spoken, the public is handed the same code sentence. No foul play. No suspect. Apparent suicide. But I have one question. One question that should stop every press conference, every rushed report, and every official who thinks history can be dismissed with a boilerplate statement. How do you know? That's the question. How do you know when the scene is still fresh? How do you know when the rope has not been fully tested? When the phones have not been mapped? When the surveillance footage has not been released? When the family has not been shown the evidence? How do you know? When America has a history of looking at Black death, calling it something convenient, and moving on, that is the history of America. That is where this episode begins, not with an accusation, but with remembrance. And then with a demand for proof, a demand for transparency, a demand that no family be told to accept a conclusion that investigators have not earned. And that title is intentional. Billie Holiday's 1939 recording of Strange Fruit did not invent the history, it exposed it. It forced America to hear it. The song began as a poem by Abel Meeropol, a Jewish schoolteacher from the Bronx, who wrote under the name Lewis Allen after seeing a photograph of the 1930 lynching of Thomas Shipp and Abram Smith in Marion, Indiana. Meeropol first titled the poem Bitter Fruit, then set it to music as a direct protest against lynching at a time when anti-lynching legislation was being blocked and Black families were still living under the threat of racial terror. Holiday's impact came from the way she made the song impossible to dismiss. At Cafe Societies in New York, one of the city's first integrated nightclubs, she performed it with the room held in silence. Service stopped, the lights dimmed, and a single spotlight stayed on her face. She usually would close her eyes with the song, took no encores, and left the audience with the image hanging in the air. That performance choice turned a nightclub stage into a witness stand. It demanded that Black suffering not be softened, entertained away, or pushed aside by polite conversation. The risk was real. Strange Fruit was not a symbolic love song or a vague complaint about injustice. It was an accusation. Holiday's regular label would not record it because of the likely backlash, so she recorded it with Commodore Records instead. Radios resisted to play it because of public discomfort. Only underscored the very point of the song. Disturbed people because it named what respectable institutions wanted to bury. They wanted to bury it over time. And over time, it became one of the clearest examples of American protest music. Not because it offered comfort, but because it refused to let the country look away. Now listen to me. That history is why a body found hanging from a tree can never be treated as just another routine scene. The image carries a national memorial of terror, official indifference, and families being denied the truth. If law enforcement want the public to trust a suicide ruling in a case like that, the answer cannot be speed or silence. It has to be proof. A preserved scene, transparent evidence, independent review, and an investigation strong enough to withstand history. The investigations. This is the investigation that never happened. I want to talk to you through what standard thorough investigation integrity is supposed to look like, and what is actually happening right now on the ground. If you find an unattended death outdoors in an open area, Basic investigative protocol says you treat that location as an active crime scene until every possible element of foul play is ruled out. You don't guess, you prove. What do that mean? That means you look down the perimeter and protect the soil for you look down the perimeter and protect the soil for shoe impressions, tire treads. You immediately preserve nearby surveillance footage before digital loops override it. You pull cell tower data to see whose phone were pinging in that exact clearing at that exact hour. You run full forensic testing on the bindings, the knots, the tree bark, and the victim's clothing for touch DNA. You canvass the area and interview everyone living or working within sight of that location. Now, that's how an investigation is supposed to be done. That's how an investigator does their job when they actually want to know what happened. Now, look at this for a minute. Look at what I see happening. See happening in these cases across the country. An officer arrives on scene, sees a hanging body, and immediately makes a visual assumption. They write, based on that visual assumption, apparent suicide on the intake form. The moment that word goes on paper, the entire investigative machine shuts off. Homicide detectives aren't dispatched. Subpoenas for phone records aren't drafted. Digital evidence sits uncollected. The scene is cleared, and the files get stamped closed. To me, that isn't an investigation. That's a rush to dispose of a case before it becomes a problem. When authorities prioritize closing a file over finding the truth, the integrity of the entire justice system is compromised. Names we must say aloud. Before we go any further, we need to say their names and mark the dates because recognition is part of justice. Willie Andrew Jones, Jr., 21 years old, found hanging from a tree in Scott County, Mississippi on February the 8th, 2018. Javion Malik McGee, 21 years old, found dead near a trucking company in Vance County, North Carolina on September 11th, 2024. DeMar Trayvon Trey Reed, 21 years old, found hanging from a tree on the Delta State University campus in Cleveland, Mississippi on September 15th, 2025. Otis James Bird, 54 years old, found hanging from a tree near Port Gibson in Claiborne County, Mississippi on March 19th, 2015. Malcolm Harsh, 38 years old, found hanging from a tree near Victorville, California on May 31st, 2020. Dominique Alexander, 27 years old, found hanging from a tree in Fort Tryon Park in New York City on June 9th, 2020. Robert L. Fuller, 24 years old, found hanging from a tree in Palmdale, California on June 10th, 2020. Kyle Basinger, 21 years old, found hanging from a tree in Marietta, Georgia on February 18th, 2026. Juliana Umba Nida, 16 years old, found hanging from a tree near a church in Charlotte, North Carolina on May 8th, 2026. Family, these are not just case files. These are sons, daughters, loved ones, young people, elders, neighbors, and community members with names, birthdays, families, and futures that deserve to be spoken with dignity. In several of these cases, listen to me, in several of these cases, officials reported suicide findings or no evidence of foul play. In other families, advocates, or communities, the question was asked for deeper reviews. But these things were denied. Recognition does not require us to overstate what is known. It requires us to refuse erasures. and insist that every life be treated with seriousness, transparency, and care. This will not just go away. This will not just go away. When I dig into the specifics of these individual cases, the lack of thoroughness becomes impossible for me to ignore. Look at Javion McGee in North Carolina back in late 2024, a 21-year-old commercial truck driver from Chicago, out on his delivery route, found seated against a tree with a rope wrapped around his neck 11 times. If this was suicide, he wrapped the rope around his neck 11 times. Every time I look at those facts, and I have to ask myself the question, what working truck driver with no documented history of suicidal ideation stops in a town he doesn't know and decides to end his life like that? And why was the initial public narrative pushed out as suicide before his family even had access to the full investigative file? Look at DeMar Trayvon Trey Reed in Mississippi in 2025. 21 years old, a freshman just starting his college career at Delta State University. He was found hanging from a tree right in the middle of the campus. State officials quickly ruled it a suicide, but I gotta ask this question. Did they immediately release every camera angle of his final moments or his final movements across that campus? Why do students and families have to march in the streets just to demand basic transparency? Look at Willie Andrew Jones Jr. in Scott County, Mississippi. In 2018, local authorities called it a suicide. Yet when the family had to scramble, raise their own money, and bring in a former chief medical examiner for an independent forensic review, that independent expert concluded the physical findings pointed to a homicide. In Mississippi alone, at least 9 black men have been found hanging from trees since 2000. Every single one officially was closed or labeled as a suicide. Every single one of them by local officials. Every single one. When civil rights organizations like Julian examined over 70 undisputed cases across the South in their report, a crimson record, they found this exact same playbook. They rushed to conclusion. This is the record that they found. They all rushed to conclusion. Missing evidence, unexamined leads, and grieving families forced to hire their own investigators just to get basic answers. When I look at this pattern, I have to ask, is this gross negligence, or is it an intentional desire to avoid opening up a hate crime or homicide investigation that might expose uncomfortable truths in local jurisdiction? Now listen to me. I know that someone might be listening to what I'm saying. You got to understand that people do die by suicide every day. But why are you not questioning the coroners? We got to get to question the coroners. I question it because history and context demand that we question the coroners. In the United States, particularly across the South, a black person found hanging from a tree carries centuries of historical terror.
Between 1877 and 1950, thousands of Black Americans were lynched, and over 99% of those murders never saw an arrest. Not an arrest, not an indictment, or a real investigation. The perpetrators walked away because local systems protected them and looked the other way. Listen to me. When that is the undeniable history of this country, law enforcement cannot simply look at a body hanging from a tree in a wood line and treat it like an ordinary closed-door tragedy. Common sense and historical awareness dictate that every single one of these deaths must be investigated as a potential homicide until the evidence conclusively and transparently proves otherwise. When local officials rush to the cameras within hours to declare nothing suspicious to see here, they are not bringing closure. They are telling the community that thoroughness doesn't matter. Transparency doesn't matter. And guess what? The victim's life didn't warrant a real investigation because it does not matter. I believe that integrity in law enforcement is measured by what you do when no one is looking. And how hard you work to find the truth when the answers are difficult to find. When a grieving mother or father has to mortgage their home to pay for a private autopsy because the local coroner won't answer basic questions, that is an utter failure of the system. We need mandatory independent investigative protocols. We need the Department of Justice stepping in automatically whenever an outdoor hanging occurs under suspicious circumstances. And most importantly, we need people who are willing to speak up and refuse to accept rubber-stamped answers. Isaiah chapter 1 and 17 says, "Learn to do good, seek justice, correct oppression, bring justice to the fatherless, plead the widow's cause." Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. That's Dr. Martin Luther King, a letter that he wrote in Birmingham jail in 1963. This is an urgent call to action. Do not wait for these stories to disappear into silence. Do not let a headline become the last word. Today, not someday, say their names, share verified information, and ask hard questions. In public, call your local sheriff, police chief, district attorney, medical examiner, state representative, members of Congress, and the Department of Justice. Demand mandatory independent review. Whenever a person is found hanging outdoors, especially when the scene carries the historical weight of a racial terror, demand preserved evidence be released in a timeline that is documented. Witness canvasses, surveillances, review forensic testing, and written explanation before any case is closed. If a family is asking for answers, stand with them while the cameras are gone. Sign petitions, attend community meetings, support independent autopsies, and legal funds when verified. Let's help produce those and keep pressure on the institutions that only move when the public refuses to look away. This is the word of wisdom. Truth is not a whisper meant to die in the shadows. Truth is a bell that keeps ringing until the living answer. Justice may walk slowly, but it must not walk alone. It is a river cutting through stone, patient and relentless, and shaped by every voice that refuses to be silent. Carry the names, carry the questions, carry the light into every room where silence has tried to sit in authority. Because what is buried without truth does not rest. It waits for the brave to uncover it. So tonight's message is very simple. When history has taught us what a rope in a tree once meant, no modern investigation gets to hide behind easy language, rushed press releases, or quiet paperwork. We said their names because memory is a form of resistance. We ask the questions because silence has protected too many systems far too long. And we return to strange fruit because Billie Holiday wanted to warn the nation that what hangs in the branches is never just one body, one case, or one family's grief. It is the evidence of a country still being asked to tell the truth about itself. So let this not end when the music fades. Let it become a phone call, a public record request, a shared post with verified facts, a letter to an elected official, a donation to a family's verified legal or autopsy fund, and a promise to keep saying these names when the news cycle moves on. If you remember nothing else from this episode, remember this. Justice is not proven by how quickly a file is closed. Justice is proven by how deeply the truth is pursued. How deeply the truth is pursued and how transparently the evidence is shown, and how faithfully the living stand with the dead until every unanswered question has been brought into the light. Do one thing for me after this episode. Ask one official what policy requires independent review in these cases. Ask one newsroom why the story went quiet, and ask one more person to listen, learn, and act. Because until we demand real accountability, these files will keep getting closed. These questions will keep getting ignored, and the truth will stay buried. That's my take. That's the elephant in the room. Thank you for listening. If this message resonated with you, share this episode, leave a rating, and keep asking the tough questions. Take care of each other, and I'll catch you the next time. My name is Pastor James. This is the elephant in the room. And as I always say, when you feel down, don't look down. Look up. And when you look up, you know he got you. My name is Pastor James. Until the next time, peace. I love you.